keyboard on this computer. So yeah, tell me, what do you think? What do you think, meaning very broadly speaking, Stoicism as a broad concept, as a school of thought, as a school of philosophy? Uh, I'll start, and I'll explain what I'm going to be doing today, and I have a few things here ready to share with you in addition to Marcus Aurelius. So yeah, I just want to see impressions, as I said, because it's important for me to also know where you guys stand at, because this is so that I would steer the discussion in a way that goes in the opposite direction as per usual. So tell me.
So maybe I'll start since you called me out. This is meant to be a rough initial first impression. Doesn't mean I'm right, but my rough first initial knee-jerk impression is to say this is good. So what is Stoicism? I don't know, but I do like something that Marcus does. Things like he seems to be for minimalism, what today we would call minimalism. Even though he's an emperor, he doesn't seem to care too much about earthly possessions. So that's great. Good diet. And he sees the good in everybody, especially his friends, his teachers. He doesn't like going to public schools and things like that, which I found interesting. That was hilarious. It's amazing to me that he can write page after page after page about the Stoic virtues of all of his great teachers and friends. I'm like, wow, you're a positive guy. And also seems to be very grateful by what, that whole mindfulness, gratefulness crap we have today. He seems to be like that, but not too much, but like, I had a good life. This is great. Like, I can't ask for more than this, despite being an emperor. That's amazing. Anyway, I'll stop rambling now.
This is yeah. This is at least a good summary, one way or the other, of his a few parts of his meditation. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to this.
Yeah. So
yeah,
Steve here. So first of all, I missed Jerry Lynn's Christmas tree. She took it down from last time. It was it lasted a long time. I like that. So I think I found interesting is I read the meditations before, and I sort of revisit them from time to time. I've also read Seneca, and in Seneca, I'm not want to name drop. It doesn't matter if you haven't read Seneca, but if you do read Seneca, he often is talking about the Epicureans in various letters, and it often seems complimentary. He sort of says, I hate these guys, and then he says, but they have this right. So this was my first time reading about the Epicureans, and I know you invited us just for general impressions, and we were going to start with the Stoics, and I'm extremely interested in the Stoics, but I found it interesting that these two, Epicureans and Stoics, so often travel together. And I'm not sure that I see a little more now why that is, but it surprised me how much Seneca sort of always says he hates them and is also always agreeing with them. And I guess it's something in this, this avoidance of, or how does he put it? It's something in this, the fact that pleasure is that the Epicureans say, let's see, what is it? Removal of everything that can give pain is sort of the ultimate goal of the Epicureans. And, there's something of that. They do it differently, but there's something of that in the Stoics. And, Marcus Aurelius, touches on it over and over and over again. But something Trishank said also I found interesting, which was he sort of, threw in Marcus Aurelius with mindfulness. And this quote from Marcus Aurelius is also in the Meditations. And you could read, if I read you this quote, you would say, what pop Buddhist person told you this? And it says, the things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts. So this is Marcus Aurelius, and this sounds like pop Buddhism to me, which I find fascinating because I'm taken both with Buddhism and Stoicism. So those are some of my impressions. I'm rereading and reading these.
This is very interesting indeed as well, and interesting observations, because I could have started with the Epicureans first, or the Stoics chronologically speaking, both the founder of Stoicism and the founder of Epicureanism, Zeno of Citium and Epicurus, were contemporaries. So yeah, we can. I decided to start with Stoicism first because, well, it's just I chose at random, to be honest. So it's curious because we're going to be discussing pleasures as well next time, and what the Epicureans meant by that, and then the discussion between the two. I have a few things also to say with regards to Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and all these Stoic philosophers who were in constant dialogue with other schools of thought, unlike maybe modern day way of things, whereby everyone is just trying to antagonize the others, even though they say we hate this and we hate that and we don't like this and we don't like that. There's always this dialogue. So yeah, this is pleasure and pain. We'll talk about all these, and the pop Buddhism is also interesting because we usually, I don't know what we assume when we think about the ancient Greeks or ancient philosophy in general, right? Because we, for some reason, and mind you, they weren't. This is. Let me start with this. It's and we'll take Epicureans and the Stoics, and we'll discuss them next time in more detail. But the idea is that first, for ancient Greeks, arguing about philosophy, as you might have seen with Socrates, and as I mentioned in several articles that I wrote, maybe including the ones I shared with you, this argumentation, this form of argumentation is not meant as a debate to prove that one person is right and the other is wrong. This did happen. This method, whereby they would argue to prove who's right or to convince the others that they were right, was the method that was applied by the sophists. We discussed the sophists briefly the other day. The sophists were not really interested in uncovering truth. They were more interested in trying to convince you that this is right. But the kind of dialogue that people like Socrates and others adopted was more what we call dialectic. Dialectic meaning establishing a dialogue. Like, so if you're writing a book or if you're discussing something with someone, you're not interested in debunking or arguing against the other as much as you're interested in trying to genuinely understand how you can improve the other person's argument, or how you can improve your view about things. And this is very important here, because when people like Aurelius or any ancient philosopher who's mentioning this school of thought and that school of thought, be it Aristotle or Epicureans or the Stoics or any other school of thought, even the Cynics, they're more interested, even if they make fun of things that other philosophers wrote, deep down they are making fun not because they're trying to prove them only wrong, they're just trying to find out not a new truth, but in improving their arguments. So this is very important. They try to build bridges more than they try to just criticize for the sake of criticism. This is one. Two, I don't know if anyone has any other thing to say besides this.
I do.
Yes.
When we said philosophy is useless,
Yep.
This school of thought seems the opposite. It seems that you can use what you learn from Stoicism in everyday life, at least in the way you think. So I just thought that it's interesting that we started this class with philosophy is useless, but a lot of what you can take from the meditations are things you can do every day, which are very useful.
you think are useful. So the other day I was explaining in the other class on Plato and Nietzsche and Bergson. I was explaining the symposium, and we're discussing the symposium, etc. And I'm like, fuck, man, like, how is this help? Like, seriously, every time I finish class, I'm like, why the hell are these people interested in whatever it is that not necessarily myself as a course, right? It's not the course itself, it's the activity, right? It's like, how can this be useful, not in the empirical kind of sense of the word, whereby you have palpable results, tangible results. It's in the broader sense, as you're just saying. How can, like, why do we have to read the Stoics for us to be able to know how to live a good life? And this is the other thing that I wanted to mention. It's like, seriously, what the fuck? Yeah, tell me.
It's the same reason why religion exists.
Let's not get started even with that, because it's like it's even worse. I'd rather ancient philosophy.
There's a lot of people who don't want to, can, or do take the effort to create their own reality of what they think, and then maybe philosophy is just the act of not only meta learning, but the meta level of meta learning. So that's for what is useful. It allows you to give a framework thinking about not only meta learning, but meta learning, and it's like even one level higher. And you can ask this foundational question of like, why do I need somebody to tell me how to live a good life? It's like, that's a lot of what a lot of religions also promise, like live a good life, literally. And I think it's because maybe a lot of people are not having that much imagination, or the arrogance or egoism to just be like, well, I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want. So
yes, and this is exactly where things become more interesting, because in the entire symposium, the dialogue, it's a dialogue about love and why we love and stuff like that. And Plato is using this in order for him to, at the end of the discussion, talk about the desire for knowledge. And so we are subject to the desire for knowledge. And this is what gets us to love wisdom, because we started with this, right? So for you to genuinely seek knowledge, whatever knowledge means, whatever, even if you don't know what you're seeking, if you're just driven by something, you're curious about something, this is for Plato, you are overcome by this desire for, quest for. And what you said is, Justine, in this case is interesting, because we assume usually that you mentioned, Stephen mentioned pop Buddhism, and we're looking at Aurelius. I'll get to Aurelius shortly. We assume that we discuss or we think, maybe nowadays, that we seek this person because this person has the answers, or that this religion has the answers, or that this philosophy has the answers, or self-help books have the answers, and then we just read them, and out of nowhere now we know how to live our lives. And this is not the case.
We can outsource thinking is the main thought.
Come again?
The main thought, the main theme might be that we can outsource thinking.
Yes, it's not that. So the genuine kind of quest, what the ancient philosophers were doing, what Socrates was trying to do, and what Marcus Aurelius was also trying to do, because meditations can be translated differently as well, and this is a crucial point also. And this is what Plato also realized. You cannot, unlike the sophists who thought that you can outsource knowledge, you can get someone to convince you something. When we're talking about things of personal interest, when we're talking about our life, when we're talking about me living my life, ultimately, I don't seek others because they have the answers. I seek others because I am interested in this journey of exploration. And this journey of exploration, as I dialogue with others, as I converse with others, I would be scrutinizing myself, I would be examining myself, my life, and that's how I'm going to be at least attempting to live a good life. So all these schools of thought, it's also important to keep in mind, we're not, the reason why they branch out and they have different principles or different modes of perceiving the world. They have different, what we would call logic, different logic in the basic sense. We're not talking about whether logic is universal or not here, and different physics as in the study of nature, and different ethics up to a certain point. It's not because they thought, well, this is the absolute truth and therefore we should try to spread the word. It was just the result of their genuine exploration. So it was a genuine attempt to read, converse, to know how to read, to learn how to read, to reread, to listen, to dialogue. So it was more of a spiritual exercise, as I started with the first session. So it was an ongoing exercise. And they just were willing to explore new things, right? And they didn't shy away from saying, you know what, Aristotle, for example, disagreed with Plato on a few things, and this is where he did his own thing. So you have a basis, instead of just discarding this basis and saying all these schools of thought are shit, I'm going to be starting afresh. They would go back for them, the classics, going back in time, 100, 200, 300 years, and learn from them, examine them, and then syncretize and synthesize this knowledge. And then they would, based on their experience, they would come up with new things. So it wasn't a theoretical epistemic quest. It wasn't about trying to prove they were right or false, their propositions were true or false, or they were right or wrong. This is, of course, important, but in what way? Not in only a theoretical sense, but in a practical sense. And this is where meditations, Marcus Aurelius' meditations come in, because a better translation of this notebook is exhortations to myself. So it's like a notebook whereby he's writing things to remind himself on a daily basis what has gone through his mind, and what he maybe did wrong, what he needs to remember, how he needs to keep. So he was keeping himself in check, and this is in a way examining himself. And I'll say a few more things, but Justine had, you have something to say?
Just because it came up in a conversation with my dad, why in English is Platon called Plateau and it's just missing the N?
I have no idea, but yes, it's Platon in Greek and in Spanish.
And in German, yeah.
And in German. I think it's just easier to read or pronounced Plato, probably. Like Platon is, yeah, but it's
in the
that's curious.
It's Platonic, right? So it's they do a
yeah, and it's something that you but his actual name is Platon. Welcome to Greek. So related to this topic, I really like this. I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value in his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. Yep. Oh yes, Platon is actually how his name is pronounced and spelled, Platon. So this is exhortations to myself, right? So this textbook is not meant, or this text is not meant to be published. It wasn't meant to be published. It was his, in a way, personal diary He's just writing to himself, and the problem is in how we should interpret this. Should I start with book 1, book 2, book 3? Well, not necessarily. You can read whatever you feel like reading, and you can jump back and forth, and you will see the same concept repeated time and again, because he's not trying to write a discourse. He's not trying to elaborate a system. He doesn't set out to prove anything. He's just really writing his own diary. And this is something that is so the actual word for this is eponemata, meaning writing, like to be exact, so a notes written on a daily basis for the author's personal use. So if we would be making the mistake of reading it as though he's explaining Stoicism, or as though he's trying to understand Stoicism. What is he trying to do? He's trying to practice Stoicism. And that's something that we don't usually do now. It's like if you ask someone, like for example, I don't know if you've taken a philosophy course with, or if you've passed by a philosophy department. They are usually, don't know how they are. And well, I've been to 2 philosophy departments in the US. They were interesting, but then these, weird philosophy professors, everyone identifies as a Humean. I'm a Humean, I'm a Kantian, I'm a Cartesian, I'm a Hobbesian. It's like, what the fuck does that mean? Right? What does it mean for me to be a Leibnizian or a Humean or a Cartesian or an existentialist? Well, nowadays we associate it with oh yes, of course, and we did cover that, and because I actually used also spiritual exercises or philosophy as a way of life. This is by Pierre Hadot. It's a very interesting book. So I used it in the philosophy of religion class, and we discussed this, that the early writings of Christianity were intended as a philosophy, and they were, many of whom were just basically trying to do that. They were trying to understand and practice instead of just writing an intellectual discourse. So a philosophy professor now, if you tell them, they would find it weird for you to say, like, do you mean you're a Stoic, like you live Stoic philosophy, or Descartes, you live Cartesian philosophy, or Kant? No, it's just that they accept their writings at an intellectual kind of level, but then they couldn't care less. Like if you see a philosophy professor now who considers himself a Platonist, but then they wouldn't be fit. And you cannot possibly be a Platonist who doesn't exercise. It's like it doesn't work, because this is not how it was. Because for Plato, like what was what?
I was just seeing that that apparently these are never to meant published texts. Like Kafka was also, I know that he was like fundamentally against the idea of them ever becoming public, and they became public and are now big. And
yeah. So but yes, it's like you cannot identify yourself as a Stoic, for example, or Epicurean, and not live their philosophy. And this is what Marcus Aurelius was trying to do. So what we're going to be doing today is I'll explain the origins of Stoicism, and then I'll tell you what Marcus Aurelius himself was trying to do. Epictetus influences him a lot. Epictetus was a slave, and then he was freed, and he started teaching Stoicism as well. So as we will see, Stoicism appealed to a broad range of people across, between brackets, the globe, from Asia until Spain. Seneca was from Spain, and Zeno was from Cyprus, Zeno of Citium. So yeah, Zeno of Citium was the founder of Stoicism. But first, before we even do that. It's like what I wanted to say was that these people, we, for some reason, we look at them with a certain distance, and we think that, or at least I don't know how we would view them. Many people would assume, you know what, yes, we need to curb our passions and stuff like that, or that I don't know if we ever would think about them or would think that they would reflect on their daily lives in a normal way, as we all do. So I just want to read a few things which are also in a way hilarious, by Seneca and by Marcus Aurelius. So for example, and before I even explain, these foods and dishes are only dead fish, birds, and pigs. This Falernian wine is a bit of a grape juice. This purple-edged toga is some sheep's hair dipped in the blood of shellfish. As for sex, it is the rubbing together of pieces of gut, followed by spasmodic secretion of a little bit of slime. What the hell is that?
Jesus, someone had a bad day, huh?
And I want to start with, like, I will focus on this, not particularly this this quote, because what are they doing here, right? Why are they pessimists? Are they disgusted by life? Do they just preach this kind of life of no enjoyment, no pleasures, etc.? No. That's also an exercise. So it's interesting how they look at things like sex. That was a bit hilarious. It's like, how do you describe sex? Well, it's the rubbing together of pieces of gut followed by the spasmodic secretion of a little slime. That was a bit...
I think he forgot hormones in the mix.
Well, yeah, as they would manifest. So, and this is Epictetus. I'd like to stand over one of these philosophers. So he's talking about, because we usually think about people, intellectuals, and with a certain aura, that they are serious and that, whatever that is. We look at Plato, we're like this, or even religious figures or anything of the sort. If you haven't read the Confessions, I would, I haven't read it all. I've read bits and pieces, but it's also interesting. So Epictetus is also this exercise of reminding ourselves, I'd like to stand over one of these philosophers when he's having sex, as to see how he sweats and strains, what kind of grunts and groans he utters, whether he can even remember his own name, much less the philosophical discourses he has heard, declaimed, or read. Marcus Aurelius applies the same method on death. Consider what it is to die, and that if one looks at death in and of itself, dissolving the images associated with death by taking part our common conception of it, he will not suspect it to be anything other than product of nature. And then in another quote, he, instead of saying I would rather see them having sex, he's like, remember that these people defecate and that they just like, so it's what are they doing here? Why? What kind of stuff is that? Imagine now thinking of Descartes and Socrates and these people having sex and making weird noises, and whether these things will be important for them, whether they will remember their names or the discourses that they heard. What's all this about?
Seems like he's he's trying to, and Aurelius does this in the Meditations. It seems like they're trying to remind all of us, rich, poor, smart, dumb, tall, short, slave, emperor, that we all have this extremely common denominator. If you're having lots of great sex, guess what? You also have to defecate. and you also have to, feed yourself food, and when you cut you bleed, and all of this. And so it's almost like a reminder that, again, and I always I find it remarkable, the overlaps with Buddhism, but it's this thing that, look, the rich man, the poor man, all these people, we all have this extremely common thread of humanity. We're not that different.
Yeah. On the one hand, it's and yes, Peter Kingsley, by the way, because you're making the connections. Peter Kingsley argues that, in a sense, one way or the other, they were influenced by Asian philosophy. I'll send you a few books if you're interested. Now, the early Peter Kingsley was legit, but then Peter Kingsley started eventually writing. He started conjecturing. He has these theories. So the early writings are more like they are more or less scholarly, between brackets. So yeah, is it only that? Is he only trying to remind himself that we are all equal? Is it a matter of only thinking to ourselves, you know what, we are only human beings after all?
I think I sort of understand what's going on here. Maybe Geraldine does too, in the sense that when I first started doing the paleo diet, the way I would try to partly convince myself that carbs were bad for you was to say imagine things like, well, this is poverty food, it's really not that great, it's hype. You have to do a lot of things to make carbs taste good, which is true, right? You need curry and things like that, chicken especially. So I think it's a way of convincing yourself, hey, you know what, sex is good, but it isn't that great if you look at it this way. Which I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but okay.
Yeah. So is he? And I'll read one more. So we seem to find in them the expression of bitterness, disgust, and even nausea in the face of human existence. So Marcus Aurelius is going to be writing this also in the following, in the Meditations. Just like your bath water appears to you, so bath water as in if you're taking a bath, oil, sweat, filth, dirty water, all kinds of loathsome stuff, such is each portion of life and every substance. So
I'm just wondering if he's like, I mean, cynically or like dark humorly, you would say, like, in nowadays times, like, is he just super frustrated, I don't know, not having enough sex in his life, or is he just the original incel? I don't know. I mean, you could argue
his
that
wife definitely had some sex, because they basically, there are theories saying that she fooled around quite a lot. Despite all this, he still loved her. So yeah, but is it only a matter of he did it? Is it a matter of anger and frustration?
Well, isn't it like already mentally experiencing some form of anger and frustration in order to prevent the actual anger and frustration from happening from external influences?
Yeah. It could be just like Trishank also with the paleo diet. It's on the one hand, so what you all said is true one way or the other, because it's just a method. So it's an exercise that he's constantly doing on a daily basis, reminding himself. Because why do we need to remind ourselves that? And if you think about it, even before we get to Stoicism, right? It's just someone who's doing this on a daily basis, and you read this book without knowing who Marcus Aurelius was, or that he was the emperor of Rome, or that his reign was marked with all sorts of disasters and catastrophes, plague and earthquakes and wars and shit like that. If we indulge in whatever it is, right? If you just think about it this way, human beings, we have the tendency of just falling or becoming prisoners of our what? What's human beings, if we want to think about our how we are made, it's just as a human, yeah. Forget about ancient philosophy or modern philosophy or schools of thought. What are we made of ultimately? Desires and needs. Yeah. So biologically speaking, we have certain desires and needs. We have certain passions. We have also thoughts, right? But then and we have instincts, desires, and we seek stuff. And it's quite often that this is also going to be sounding a lot like Buddhism. It's like the source of all suffering for the ancient Greeks were desires and the passions and our needs. And this is what the Epicureans are also going to be saying. They all shared this view. It's like, why are we miserable human beings? Well, because we have desires and we want to constantly fulfill our desires. And you get into this kind of, you spiral into the abyss of trying to constantly fulfill your desires, which are never actually fulfilled. And so in a way, if you have sex or if you start acquiring wealth, you become prisoner to your wealth. So if or having it's as though your life, think in terms of modern day as well. It need not necessarily be only ancient times. It's like if all of a sudden overnight now you have if you had Bitcoin and then I don't know 10 years later you have now $30 million, right? And you sell the Bitcoin and now you have $30 million, and how will you react? And not only will you spend them or not, forget about the spending part. It's just, it feels nice. And then you start thinking, you become obsessed with your, with wealth, with keeping it, or,
First you see it as normal, as like part of your life. I think the moment you start, or you start seeing things as part of your life, then it becomes dangerous, because then the moment they get taken away or you take them away, then suddenly your life stops, and you have to find a new life. And if you instead like be aware of what kind of luxury you have, then you can take a lot away and live very freely, because well, it's taken away, you still have your life.
So it's we completely, this is, by the way, Trishang, this definition is actually very interesting. Stoicism, that's a good tweet. Stoicism be like, Bitcoin is just a bunch of useless ones and zeros that grind against each other. Yep. So we tend to forget the point. Even if you're just a philosophy professor, right, an academic, with time, your life, you start, I think we mentioned this before, and this is why I told you we'll get to it. Like, you start identifying your life with what you do, and then you just think that your life revolves around this. That I'm a philosophy professor at the university, I'm an academic, my life revolves around proving that Plato said this, or Plato said that.
Sorry, is that, in my impression so far, it's something that is very culturally dependent. I've realized that while traveling, I traveled literally around the globe.
Why culturally dependent? Now, if we're talking
I don't know yet why.
Because there are these elements in a way. So
is it just me, or is the internet connection?
My internet. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, now again. Yeah.
Okay. I'm using 4G, so if my 4G sucks, I'll switch to Wi-Fi. Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Every 20 minutes, like for a second or something. It's not bad.
Okay. If we're thinking now, it's we can talk about, the different cultures, etc. But then, without this culture and how each culture would deal with such situations, the idea is that we can be prone to becoming prisoners of our passions and desires. We become addicted to things. We become overly obsessive with things, or with just modern day times, consumerism, etc., etc. So the ancient Greeks were aware of that, and for them, they wanted to get rid of this. But get rid of this how? How can we control our desires and passions? How can we try to curb these desires and passions? Do we live an ascetic life? Do we ditch absolutely everything and go live in whatever on the outskirts of society, not participating in civil life? Or how should we do it? Well, the Stoics will approach it from one perspective. The Epicureans, next time we'll see, they will try to sort it out or try to tackle the issue differently. But for starters, and even Plato before thought about it differently, but we'll start with Zeno today as the founder of Stoicism. So Zeno was on his way, he was a merchant, and he had a shipwreck. So imagine now you're wealthy, etc., or you have a business, and overnight your business just goes bankrupt. Exactly. This is so then you go to Zeno of Citium. His dates are 334 262 BC. He went to put yourself in his position, right? One day you have a business, put your Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, right? And tomorrow you go bankrupt, or who was it? Jack Ma, I think. Yeah, uninsured. They want to.
Well, Jack Ma, we don't know where he's rotting right now.
Yeah, yeah. But the idea here is that all of a sudden you lose absolutely everything. How will you deal with it? 2008 market crash, for example. It's one day you have everything you wanted, on the day after you've lost everything. So how are you going to be dealing with this? And Zeno, it left quite the impression, because you think to yourself, some people would just blame fates and God and nature and everything, and they would think they are the targets of this attack, right? And you would start having conspiracy theories. Yes, but hedonism here, in modern day sense, is what Epicureans were hedonists. So it's quite funny how what originally meant to curb your desire becomes seeking pleasures and overindulging in them. But we'll get to it next time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, because
that's like communists ending up embracing capitalism. That's hilarious.
Yeah, because for them it was counterintuitively, it's like if you satisfy your basic pleasures, and you satisfy it up to a point, and that's it, basic needs. So we'll discuss them next time. But yeah, someone could not fathom in one of the classes how hedonism meant that back in the day, and I'm like, this is their philosophy, man. But anyway, so Zeno, how would you react in this case, right? Would you start blaming the gods and think that it's only raining on you, and you start weaving conspiracy theories because they want to attack you, etc.? Or how would you react to it? And this is where I start sharing. I remember we're still discussing Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism.
I think it's very backward looking. I mean, it's looking at what happened instead of looking where to go. Like, why do I care who is responsible? Like, if it's the gods or if it's something else. I mean, I'm more interested in figuring out where I'm going to go in my life than where I came from.
Exactly. And someone said, who said, just like Trump, Shashank? Yeah. So yes, it's like I wouldn't accept it. I would accept it, etc. And if you want to try to think about it in a rational way, and rational way in ancient Greece doesn't mean the rational way as we understand it today. It means like thinking about it, not calculating and trying to figure out stuff in a very scientific manner, but just like thinking about what happened, right? Trying to make sense of what happened and how to deal with the situation. And Zeno went to Athens. He was exposed to a series of, there were several schools of thought, different philosophical schools, as I said. There are many Zenos. This one is from Citium. What's happening? Okay. Zeno, 341, 270. And he was exposed to to different schools of thought, including the Cynics. I don't know if you know Diogenes the Cynic, but then the Cynics, this is where someone being even cynical now means something else. But then Diogenes the Cynic was against all sorts of customs and norms. So he would make it a point to masturbate in public, to have raw meat, all stuff that went against. Yes, I write about that in Sardonically Speaking, because it was like he took it too far. But he had skin in the game, such that one of the theories about how he died was he got food poisoning because he ate an octopus, I think, and he was poisoned. Because he insisted on eating things raw. So he wanted to live, the Cynics wanted to live, and this is important, in accordance with nature. So the discussion here becomes about the difference between living our lives in accordance with nature versus living what we call, or what they understood by it, a civilized life. So remember, this is Cynics. But the words here are important, and this is why I'm mentioning the Cynics, not just because I wanted to talk about him doing weird shit. And he lived in a barrel and did weird things. So whatever society did, he wanted to do the absolute opposite, because he wanted, as I said, to live in accordance with nature. So we have living in accordance with nature versus living a civilized life, whatever that means, right? So including customs, traditions, laws, etc. And it gets you thinking, right? It gets you to start thinking, what does it mean for us to live in accordance with nature? How should we live our life? What should we follow? What kind of, and if we are going to be having laws, justice, temperance, etc., ethics, where do we derive them from? If we look at nature, for example, and you see dogs and cats having sex with each other, and then even what we call ourselves as incest, a mother with her son, etc. It's like should we do like they do, or where do these things come from? So it's just food for thought. Zeno was also introduced to Plato's philosophy. He was studying it with at the academy that Plato founded, but it was headed by someone else. Plato had died, and he was exposed to Aristotle's philosophy, and he was no. That's why I said Zeno of Citium is different from Zeno of I can remember somewhere in Italy, I think. Zeno of, I forgot. It will come back. But yeah, it's not the Zeno's paradox.
In the chat, it was written Elia.
Right? Yes, Zeno of Elia. Yep. So why am I mentioning all this? Because he was exposed to all these different schools of thought, and he started thinking to himself, about this, the way of nature, thinking about things like justice, living a good life, Plato's theory of forms, which we've discussed before, and living a virtuous life, a life of virtue. What does that mean? Living an ethical life, meaning living a life cultivating good character, and at the same time seeking knowledge and wisdom. And he started also thinking about what happened to him. How am I going to be overcoming this? How should we be living our lives? What kind of stuff we should be taking into consideration? And he nah, yeah. Thanks for the marketing tip. So yeah, I am giving an ethics course, but if you're interested, we'll discuss virtue ethics. But yeah, anyway. So the idea was that he went to the Stoa, the colonnade. It was, columns covered. It was up to the north of the marketplace in Athens. So he was in the center of society, of the city, more or less, which is also important because the Epicureans will decide to leave the city. They will be at the outskirts of the city. They will buy a house and they will just live there. They didn't want to participate in society. So the Stoics have a different conception. From its inception, from its origin, Zeno is going to be going to this is why they are called Stoics. Stoa, as I said, there are columns, it's covered at the marketplace, and he just started teaching there. And of course, things will start evolving. Like they would be discussing things. He wrote, he has a few writings, and he's going to be thinking about things. But all this to say one particular thing which is important for the Greeks or for the Stoics. He's going to be establishing a difference between what we can control and what we don't have control over. So in relation to the shipwreck, right? How are we going to be dealing with life? Shit happens in life, right? Shit happens. But then how am I going to be thinking about things? How am I going to be thinking about what happens in my life? I have a shipwreck. How will I think about it? How will I approach it? How will I try to process it? And if you think about it, it's like, what can we control in our lives? What can we have control over? Our mind.
The future.
Only the future. This is where, yes, it's our. We'll get to it. This. I'll start with modern day kind of. Is it our choices, actions? Because the way evolutionary psychologists and everyone now is very focused on predictability. No, it's like science works because it can tell you what will happen in the future, kind of. If you have data and statistics, you can know what will happen in the future, or you can know certainty, kind of. So truly, we don't control anything in life, right? At least the ancients believed that. This is way before Newton and before the mechanistic view of the world and the conditions and physics, Newtonian physics. Exactly. So we have, from a Zeno-Stoic perspective, they understood that the only thing you have control over is your attitude towards what happens in the external world. So as Stephen said, what we can control is our mindset. And in a different way, it's our ethics, our ethical framework. And this is ethics broadly speaking, like what we think is good to do and what we think is bad to do, right? So if I think it's good for me to, let's say, study philosophy or to do business this way, that way, this is what I can control in a way, meaning that I can prepare myself, I can start pursuing it, I can start practicing it, I can, if courage is good, or if being generous is good, or if being educated is good, so whatever virtues we assume are good, this is what we need to actively seek, versus trying to refrain from doing the bad things like murder, like lying, whatever. And this is, I'm just using them in general terms, right? Lying versus honesty, etc. It's just, these are, whatever the good things are, we need to pursue them. Whatever the bad things are, we need to refrain from doing them. You guys,
how do you refrain from doing bad things if you can't control your actions?
No, you can only control your actions. So the only
Yes.
thing you can control is your actions, but you cannot control. So for example, your actions now is that you want to, you have a business and you're running a business, right? But then Corona happens. So how, this is Stoicism is actually very, very interesting for us now, because we're living, like if you were in Lebanon, I would have used a different example, but then Corona is something we all have in common now.
That is all dependent on you having free will, because if there's no free will, then you don't really have control over your actions.
No.
You take.
No. Because irrespective of whether you think there's free will or not. Oh yeah, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, when it comes to your decisions, it's not only, even if you don't have a free will, you can still say no.
But then wouldn't that be an expression of my free will to consciously and be free in deciding no? Like otherwise it would be no free will.
Yes, but the thing is,
I mean, if it's already known that I will say no, it's still no free will.
No, it's, and I don't want to get into that discussion, because we will end up only discussing free will versus are we determined or are we not.
I think separate from free will, you still have you usually don't really directly control your actions and thoughts. Isn't it more a case of like cultivating a part of character that then will eventually result in you taking certain courses of actions?
Yes, this is
very indirect.
This is it, because it's not that I. So this is why it's. In fact, in a way, we are free, and that's the argument that Kant is going to be giving, and I'm giving Kant's argument because it's helpful here. The fact that we care about good and bad means, at some level, we have freedom of choice. Because if we weren't really free, we wouldn't care about things like incest and weird shit and murder. But think in terms of cats and dogs and the animal kingdom in general. So it's the idea here is, what do you mean? How would slaves?
So let's say I'm a slave, so I have completely no choice in what I do. So I'm a slave.
Epictetus was freed. So it's so here again, think about it this way. So you don't have a choice about being a slave, even if they haven't condemned slavery, but it's an external kind of factor. It's not something that you have a saying in it. So, and not to justify, right? But then Epictetus dealt with it. He was a slave and he was a Stoic, and he dealt with it in a way such that he thought to himself, you know what can I do about it? Now I can do nothing, so I will work accordingly. So being a slave depends on external forces more so than your choice. But when it comes to our choices of whether I should eat or not should eat, whether I should tell a lie or not, the fact that we care about whether I should lie or not, irrespective of what I'm going to be saying afterwards, this is where we have a choice. Now,
assuming you have free will.
Yes and no, but we can discuss this like afterwards, because that's a completely different topic. Yeah, the Stoics, so they it's a bit complicated for the Stoics, and free will is a bad concept. We can discuss it when we get to Descartes and whatnot. But the idea here is that ultimately we have a choice, in that we can now, whether it's grounded in our biology or not, it doesn't matter. The idea is you have a shipwreck, or now Corona. We don't have a choice in Corona. It's just, maybe we did have a choice, right? This is besides the fact. How did Corona happen? Well, you know what? It's beyond our control. As you and I and those who are in class, like, we weren't involved. All of a sudden, you are facing this new reality. So how will we behave? How will we react to this? And this is where the Stoic comes in. And the Stoic says, you know what? We cannot control these external forces. What we can control is how we react to these external forces. How will we react to these external forces? How is it important to discuss, or how are we going to be thinking about it? Because it's also maybe not necessarily counterintuitive, but it's interesting how the Stoics think. Is Corona a good thing or a bad thing? Bad thing or a good thing as the fact that it happened? Yeah, not.
Is that a serious question?
Yeah, it's a serious question.
It depends.
Does it have?
Depends on where you are on your society. Depends on in which position you are. It can be good and it can be bad. It can be in between. It can be totally not important.
What do you guys think? Besides that, like, it can be good, it can be bad. Anyone here has any other view of it?
I think Nassim's response to Corona. He had a tweet once which said something like, what was it? How well you responded to Corona will indicate how robust you will be for the next several decades. Something like that.
Yeah. But is it good or is it bad that it happened?
Neither. It's neither good or bad. It's not objectively good or objectively bad. I mean, it's good according to what? Like, in what situation? I mean, we have to define a bit more. But what's good or bad is how you react to Corona happening, I think, versus it happening by it in and of it itself.
Yeah, but so think about it also this way. You've been planning a gap year, starting last year, let's say April, and you were planned to travel the world, and you had everything put in place, everything. You've done your reservations, or maybe not, whatever that is. You've made plans, and 2020 was going to be the best year for you. And then lockdown happens. How will you react to that? What would you certainly bad?
I guess I agree with Tan that, of course, if you're someone with high risk of getting the disease, if it's very bad. If you're someone whose business depends on not having lockdown, of course it's very bad. And but if you're Amazon, it's pretty good. So
Yeah, and in my case, I'm now, only because of Corona, was able to convince my favorite bar in Munich to do a virtual bar, and we're now a virtual bar that is open despite lockdown legally, and he's super happy, and that would have never happened if it wasn't for Corona.
How does that work?
That's the topic for after this course, but it's
like you deliver booze.
It's like it was a job to be done metaphor, thinking like, what is a bar? And a bar is a place where I can meet with friends, and I don't have to care about the place being there, and it's good drinks. I don't want to mix them myself, otherwise I wouldn't go into a bar, I would stay home. And it's nice ambience, and sometimes chatting with him, and being a private space in a public area. So you have like a breakout rooms, so you're private, and he can join. He joins from the bar and has a good microphone and good video, and people are happy. They have good quality cocktails, and they get like a little. That's one of his specialties, like little 10 milliliter bottles as well, to like fine tune the cocktail that he usually would do in the bar. Now you can do that yourself at home.
Nice.
People do that, and they're happy.
Yeah,
and it's something that would have never happened if it wasn't for Corona with him.
And the idea here is that Stoics, a stressor that we need. Yes, you're right. But the Stoics refrain from value judging anything that happens beyond their control. So any external forces, Corona happens, they would refrain from judging it, whether it be good or bad. They just accept the fact that Corona happened. They just accept the fact that we grow old, right? The problem is, they think, is when we start value judging any events or anything that happens in the world. Because when we start thinking in terms of, oh my God, Corona it's bad or it's good, this will affect our psyche. This will affect how we deal with situations. It's just like the example I gave you. If you've had all your travels planned, etc., and then out of nowhere, Corona outbreak, and then if you value judge it as good or bad, this will affect your emotions and your desires and your psyche. So if you think it's bad, it will affect you one way or the other. And if you think it's good, you will also act accordingly. And this is why the Stoics refrain from thinking in terms of, oh, this is good, oh, this is bad. The only thing they think about in terms of good or bad is their actions. Why? Because my actions are fundamentally ethical, or I need to be a good person, I need to be an ethical person, but then anything that happens outside, I'm not going to be judging as either good or bad. I am going to be, that's an interesting concept, indifferent to anything that happens. And if you think about it, if I die, nature defeated me. Yes, in a way, but mind you, so it's not a matter of, okay, this indifference to external forces doesn't mean I should not deal with the risks, with disease, with the fact that I'm growing old, right? So I am getting older how will I deal with it? Yeah. So you grow old. What do? Do you sit down and say, you know what, I'm accepting my fate, I will grow old? Or do you train and exercise so that you would learn how to grow old? Yeah. So it's important to distinguish between value judging growing older, because many people would think, you know what, I'm getting older, this is bad, oh my God, it sucks, and then it affects you in a way, versus, you know what, the fact is, and that's where we get to the part where they're discussing sex and weird stuff like that. It's like this is what they call looking at things objectively. Objectively, not in the sense of understanding how reality is in a scientific way. It's just understanding that this is, if you take out this value judgment Is a volcano erupting good or bad? It just happens. Is Corona good or bad? Disease happens. Now we can discuss whether it's natural or it was synthesized in a lab. That's completely different. Like, we live in a shitty world nowadays, and we have to deal with this. But the idea is, if we assume that, you know, bad forces all over the place and weird shit going on, and this is bad, it's going to be affecting us. So, but what we need to do is we need to refrain from thinking in terms of this is good or this is bad, and oh my God, this is not cool and this is cool. And what we need to do is we need to adapt. We just need to basically do what we can control, to pursue what we can control.
But isn't this effectively like the old saying of love it, change it, or leave it? So you love it, you change it, or you leave it. I mean, if you like, you should only complain about things that you would then actually care so much about that you actually try to change. Otherwise, you wouldn't.
No, it's like, it's what you need to, the only thing you need to care about is yourself, is how you're going to be doing things, your business, your life. And I'll get to the part where we discuss a community, but that's at the beginning. This is the fundamental kind of part of Stoicism. It's like, anything I cannot control, I'm not going to be value judging as good or bad. Why? Selfish view? You mean the Stoics? You're on mute.
Yeah, I was just responding to your comment.
Yeah, tell me.
Saying that, no, just a few sentences ago, you said you just have to view it from one's perspective, whether it affects others or not. It doesn't matter to you.
No.
Maybe I misinterpreted.
Yeah, we'll also discuss this. So for now, we're just thinking in terms of at a personal level. Yeah, this is a very basic level. At the personal level, it's all about, because mind you, the discussion is going to be how this will scale, and whether this will scale, and this is where we'll get to someone like Marcus Aurelius. It's think in terms of Zeno with a shipwreck, etc. How will I be dealing with this thing? So you would think to yourself, in the sense of Zeno, maybe he was taking care of his vessel, of the ship. Everything was put in place. Or in modern day times, like, you've taken care of the airplane. It has enough fuel. It will get you to the destiny. You've taken all precautions. Right? You've done what you have to do in order to get the shipment to its destiny. But then shit happens, like a technical error or shit happens. What will you do? Well, you know what? It's beyond your control now. You've studied for an exam, let's say, or you've prepared for this interview, you've been working on this code for the past, I don't know how many hours and days, and then shit happens and you have bugs all over the place, or then your boss says one thing and then someone else says another thing. What you can control in all this is how you react to things. So if your boss doesn't like what you did, well, can you change the fact that your boss doesn't like what you did? And your boss is an asshole, maybe, or not. But the idea is, will you start thinking in terms of, my boss is a shitty person? If you start thinking that, it's going to be influencing how you do your work. And in this case, what the Stoic would say, you know what? Forget about what your boss says. Do your work, and that's it. Try to do the best work possible, and then see how things go without kind of focusing, or without this, between brackets, victimology narratives nowadays. It's like, oh my God, my boss hates me, or oh my God, this is bad, or shit, I did not get into this school, or Harvard did not accept me, or I did not get into med school, etc. Right? Because we have plans in life, and this is why Stoicism is also about hedging. Like you do your plans, but then you don't focus on one particular plan, or you don't think in terms of that's it. If I get into med school, it's the best thing that will have happened to me in my life, versus if I don't get to med school, my life will be hell. And you see people who go through all this. Like, if I don't get into this, and then I would sit down and start lamenting and think that this is the end of the world. Well, no. If you lose your wealth, like for example, Zeno, you would start thinking, you know what, life sucks. What's the point? Why should I live now that I've lost everything? And we can take it to a more macabre kind of situations, but then I'm only going to be referring to the simple stuff. And in terms of, explosions and wars and shit like that, how will you deal with that? Well, shit happens. Because why? Because it's beyond my control. It's not that war is good or bad, because if you look at it in a way or the other, shit happens. And whether we like it or not, there is war, let's say, right? So how will we deal with it? And this is why Marcus Aurelius here becomes important, because Marcus Aurelius, who is the Roman emperor, so is Stoicism about, therefore, we should just sit down and do nothing in our lives, or should we pursue our lives in any capacity that we are in?
Mahmoud,
yes.
Sorry, I have a question. You live in Lebanon, and of course I lived there for most of my life.
Yeah.
Do you just accept that the political class are just, treating you the way they are? At what point do you say, okay, I have to change this?
See, this is the point here. It has nothing to do with whether I should change or not, or should pursue to try to put forward a different agenda or try to find a solution. The difference here is as follows. So Stoicism is not a call to inaction, because Marcus Aurelius, as I said, was a Roman emperor. He was the emperor of Rome. He participated in wars. He had to deal with a plague. He had to deal with disasters across the empire, as I said, earthquakes and shit like that. And he participated in war. He had, between brackets, skin in the game. He traveled around, and he was attacked from the east, and then he was attacked from the west, and he was constantly on the move. And his wife died during in one of the, I forgot which country it was, but then, so he is the Roman emperor. Yeah, so he's and that's why he exhortations to himself. Does it mean I should accept the status quo? No, I should not accept the status quo. I should improve. I should even try to improve myself and others. This is where discussion and dialogue comes in. We should seek to improve ourselves. But that's why we should seek to improve ourselves, become better people as individually and society, because the only thing that we can control is making ourselves better and getting other people to become better versions of themselves. So in Lebanon, the problem is when you start, according to Stoicism, and maybe this will apply now in the US, and I don't know where else, when you start accusing the political class or when you start looking at corruption as bad and as the end of the universe, and as therefore all this is shit and they become the enemy and blah 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 blah. So in a way, you don't look at corruption as something bad. You look at them as doing something as them being unethical, and based on that, well, we are fucked, right, in Lebanon. So, but do I say the situation is fucked and this is bad and I need to you would stress over that. So
you have a strong lockdown. You're less fucked than in Germany sometimes, it seems.
Oh, believe me, we are fucked in a way.
If I look at the death rates, Germany is right now top 5 globally in like total amount of deaths per week. Like we're not in a good place.
Yeah, but without a semi-nuclear explosion 5-6 months ago that you had that traumatizes you, right? So it's for me this is the thing. It's like if you look at the explosion as something bad, or COVID as something bad, and deaths as something bad, it complicates things according to the Stoics. Keep that in mind. What you need to do is, and I know this is weird nowadays to look at that, but it's like instead of channeling your anger to the issue itself as something bad, try to work on cultivating an environment where people seek to become better, because this is where change really happens. So you cannot in a way, I'm trying to think now in terms of how we should do things in Lebanon, or anywhere politically. It's like this stalemate between two political parties, let's say in the US, who accuse each other of being shitty and enemies, etc. It's how will you resolve that, right? Because if you don't talk to that person because this is bad or what they do is bad, etc., how will you ever talk? How will you ever discuss things? How will you?
It might happen soon by like my old thinking of like they just need a third party on the federal level. They need to have like this little fucker who's always like tipping the balance that they always need to talk to, like this coalition partner, and then they need to either be like just no progress, or they will have to talk. And I think that might happen actually.
Yeah, and so it's but if you don't, does this mean therefore that I shouldn't be politically involved? No, of course. And there's war, and there are discussions, and things happen, but then without this prism of looking at things in terms of, oh, this is good that it happened, or this is bad that it happened, because the only thing that we can control is ourselves. So much so that, for example, Marcus Aurelius and the Stoics in general argue that if other people, and this is, I don't know whether you agree with it or not, we can discuss this eventually. If other people do you wrong, it's not because it is premeditated, because they are evil. It's because they don't know any better.
I think I like Assad's question. It's I've heard it put, a lot of people think of Stoics. This is not my analogy, and so the credit to somebody else for pointing this out. But a lot of people think of Stoics as sort of a cow in a field, and it starts to rain, and the cow just sits there looking sad, and that's a Stoic. You know, you just accept, oh shit, it's raining, here it is, and that's not it. You know, nope. The Stoics are more, okay, it's raining, this happens, of course, shit happens. We all know that, like, accept that. Now, don't be an idiot, get out of the rain. You know, you need to take a practical response to this. So to the question of, hey, what do you do with the shitty politics in Lebanon, or, you know, whatever moment it is that we're talking about, it's, you know, don't get carried away with losing your mind that the crappy thing has happened or that your situation sucks. It's more just that, okay, be level about that. Don't do anything rash. And now, you know, work your way towards something better.
And this rash thing is very important, because you need to take your time, because this rashness is the outcome of which is what Trishang, I think, commented. It's as though we're automatically kind of, you read a tweet and all of a sudden you're now all riled up and you want to jump to do this or do that, or people who as we saw, who cannot understand why Nassim waited for 4 years to say what he learned about Trump's presidency, right? Discovered this. Interesting. Yeah, because so the idea, but not only when the emotions are high. So we need to about how we are going to be, because it's there's a second order kind of effect to things, because not only are you emotional about it, you think that what happened is bad, and now you're even angrier. Like you're more angry at something because you think it's bad that it happened. And it's, instead of now trying to deal with the situation, rational here doesn't mean calculating, as I said, abstractly, etc. No, it just means knowing what options you have, thinking about the possibilities that you have. But then if you're all too caught up in thinking that this is bad, and you're angry, and you jump to you make rash decisions about absolutely not first order thinking, but they avoid that second order kind of reaction to things. So they are not reactionaries in a way. They don't jump to, they refrain from value judgments, and they try to second order thinking in terms of like thinking about possibilities, thinking about their decisions, etc., but without without rushing into things. So you take your time. And this is why the ancient Greeks in general, this is something that we miss maybe nowadays. They start at the individual level, at the community level. So it's pretty localist in a way. Staying in emotions keeps you stuck instead of allowing you to move forward. Yeah. So the question becomes how to scale it up, and whether it scales up, because there are things that depend on us. And to go back to what Tan said, individually, I have to do what I yeah the Stoke Cow Rain doesn't tweet, it's outrage, yell at yeah or not, if the cow doesn't find anywhere else that would shelter her from the rain. But yes. So the idea here is, individually we can control ourselves one way or the other. We can try to teach by example our kids, and a community at a small level, at a small community, local community, maybe it works. But then the problem is, like Marcus Aurelius was well aware that when you run an empire, people might be betraying you. No, and if you're the emperor, people would do Stoic cow. What would the cow do? So as humans, we are agents, and we deal with other people. Until Marcus Aurelius then enjoys the dead meat, and then you're like, there's this Twitter account, Carnivorous Aurelius or something, and then you're gone. And then he devours your liver, particularly. This person is even now selling liver, right? Liver treats. So there, this is where we get to the triple rule that Marcus Aurelius had. Ooh, yum! Have you tried them? The Aurelius one? Have you? Do you know which account I'm talking about? Man, if this Stoic cow account actually catches up.
Yeah, what the fuck is carnivorous? Or I used to see him. Is he like a? How can you be? Anyway, it's weird. You should explain this to us.
No, he's not a carnivore. He's I don't know who runs the account, by the way, but he's got interesting stuff, and he actually came to understand eventually that only carnivore is not the way to go. But he does have a liver fetish, and it seems that Geraldine also like sliver. Cow liver or lamb or anyone here? I don't know if you guys know, but in Lebanon, I'm not sure about Turkey maybe as well, or we've spoken about that. We have raw liver and raw meat. Yeah, it's like raw with not absolutely nothing, just some salt and raw sheep fat tail as well. Deep brain and tongue was something my Persian friends turned me onto. Deep what?
No, sheep.
Sheep brain and tongue? How?
Yeah, man, it's a Persian thing. It's pretty good.
You know, we do have that, but how? Is it like cooked with rice, stuffed?
I think they were lentils. Don't remember the rice. But knowing the Persians, there must have been rice.
Yeah, it's like we basically they eat absolutely everything around here. It's like the intestines, the tongue, the brain, and absolutely everything. Don't know if anyone there.
I mean, in Bavaria we also eat brain, and there's a soup which is literally called sour lung. So it's lung. Liver, of course, is a delicacy. So
most med food would be banned in the US for sure. Food safety stuff is like you're eating raw whatever. Yeah.
I get a stomach bug every time I go back to Lebanon from here because my immunity to bad foods has gone down here.
Yeah, the same shit happened to me when I was in Spain, and then I would come back here. It was fucked up, but then with time now I'm back to normal here. Yeah, and that's something we discussed the other day, or in the religion class, philosophy of religions. Like we talk about being certain of absolutely everything. It's like, are you certain that your delivery, your food is not going to be poisoning you? And that's something Hume will be discussing. Think about that. Like, so you have to trust. At one level, there has to be trust in society, within a certain society. You trust that if you go somewhere else and you order something, you're not going to be poisoned. Which incidentally, talking about Marcus Aurelius here, he used to taken potions as well. What was it called? To prevent for any possible poisoning. I don't know how it's pronounced. Theriac. I don't know if you guys know it. So it had opium in it, but then they had to reduce it a bit so that he wouldn't end up. So ointment, medicinal compound used as an antidote to snake venom or poison. That has opium. Yeah, but anyway, because some scholars wanted to argue that Marcus Aurelius was depressed, or that he had anxiety and shit like that, or that he had opium addiction. But Pierre Hadot argues against that. Like, you cannot conclude that, because we have this obsession with trying to give or analyze someone's psyche based on what they wrote for some reason.
Yeah, I hate that. Sorry, Mahmoud, one question.
Yeah, sure.
What do Stoics think about drugs? Like, I don't know, coffee, alcohol, opium, whatever.
See, this is the thing. It's they wouldn't think anything in that sense. So this is they wouldn't value judge. as something which is good or bad. It's the idea here would be because it had opium, the potion that he had to take, but they don't have a problem with it. So drinking is not. Now we can talk about let me start with this and I'll get to the three. A better question would be, or a better example would be wealth. Now, when it comes to drugs or alcohol, it's a bit it's trickier. And but wealth, what do we do with wealth? So should I be a poor person? Should I ditch my wealth and sit down and in the corner like the stoic cow and do absolutely nothing and just move all along and not participate? No, because the idea here is, so addiction in this sense, that's controlling your addiction in a way. And I always use Stan Marsh. He's Stan, right? He's no, not Stan, Randy, his father, basically. He once had this addiction, alcohol. He was drinking beer, etc. Is the problem alcohol? Would I say alcohol is bad? No, I would say my approach to alcohol is bad. Yeah, Seneca didn't. So the idea here is I wouldn't renounce pleasures. I wouldn't live miserably, because Stephen said, and many people assume that this is what the Stoics would argue. It's not about ditching every other pleasure in life. It's just the idea that when you keep reminding yourself that sex is just two bellies rubbing against each other and what slime stuff being secreted all across, this is in a way, this is what Woody Allen would say. It's like sex is just two people exchanging liquids or fluids. So when you remind yourself that, you understand that life is not about only that. You understand that life is not only about sex or wealth or wine or your job or whatever that is. You know that it's not about all that. We're made two bellies rubbing together. Yeah. Well, your mom was it Epictetus who said that? Yeah. And talk is what you have to go through to get the sex. So it's like, yeah. As you now see, by the way, I have an OnlyFans account if you guys are interested. It's not verified because we don't have OnlyFans, but then I do intellectual striptease and yeah, mental gasms if you're interested in them. Ruined mental gasms, like I get you to the point where I discuss Plato and then I change subjects. But anyway, so it's not that wealth is good or bad in itself, right? This is where we refrain from uttering any kind of value judgment. Is wealth good? No. Is it bad? No. Is being poor good? Is being poor bad? No. It's just a matter of fact. So now, of course, and you don't think in terms of, okay, what should I do with my wealth in terms of, should I invest it or not? Of course you invest it. And of course, if someone cannot find shelter, the virtues are to care for other people. Not that being poor in itself is bad. It's just shit happens. So in this case, if you are wealthy, you train yourself, you put yourself in a mindset whereby you start imagining that it's just money. It buys you things, yes, but it's just money. You enjoy it, yes, but it's just Bitcoin ones and zeros, right? It's life now is not all about Bitcoin, like the cult that it is now. It's as though everything becomes about Bitcoin. or everything becomes about this or that. So it's, if you keep reminding yourself that, then you understand that it's not about pursuing wealth or not, or pursuing this or not. It's just about putting yourself in a situation whereby you don't become prisoner to the passions, to your desires and emotions. So you keep yourself in check. Maybe tomorrow I will wake up and I will not have anything. Same with death. If you really think about it, what is death? Well, you die. That's it. So, and if someone else dies, yes, they're dead. It's just, they're dead. They're not here. Now, saying that seems to us to be, if you say that to someone, it's like, it's as though you've committed a sin, right? It's how dare you say something like that? But the Stoics would remind themselves of this because this is part of nature. This is how nature is. It's nature's way. So wealth, status, all this, it's not that it's good or bad in itself. It's just, what will you do when you become the Roman emperor? And Marcus Aurelius himself was the Roman emperor, and he kept himself in check, and Seneca. So no, it's not about enduring pain. No, it's not about sitting down and saying, oh shit, I'm in pain and I need to accept it. It's the other, it's not even the other way around. It's just accepting the fact. And then, does this mean I'm in pain, therefore I shouldn't try to alleviate the pain? No, you do alleviate the pain. But you do the rational thing, which is, okay, let's see how we can tackle the issue. Let's see how we can resolve the issue. Not sit down and think, oh my God, I'm in pain, or oh my God, I'm poor now, I don't know what to do. So it's, to go back to Trishank's question, it's not about the alcohol itself, it's not about the food itself, it's not about the drugs itself, it's about how you will approach these substances, or these or your wealth, or being in office, how you are going to be dealing with things, etc. On the daily that he was going to die, I wouldn't be surprised if he did that. It's like, you need to keep someone to tell you things as are. Nowadays, we've become overly sensitive. It's like, if you tell someone something, they go into, oh my God, I'm offended. Oh my God, come on, man,
What's that? Somebody will remember it, but didn't when the Roman emperors would be on triumph through Rome, there would be somebody behind them reminding them. What is it? Somebody can finish that. There would be somebody behind them reminding them something to keep them humble.
I don't know if anyone knows this about how you will approach your smartphone. Yeah, I'm not sure about the Romans, to be honest, but I'm because I'm also preparing for tomorrow's class on tragedy and Nietzsche. It's so the Greek tragedians would after.
No, I got it.
After okay, so tell me.
Yeah, no, just to finish that thought. So they would, I mean, it's memento mori. So they would just be reminding them. So you have a slave walking behind them in triumph, constantly repeating memento mori, remember death.
Yeah,
that you will die. And so this was like part of the. Yeah, Trishank says it too. So this was part of the ceremony when you would be at your highest. You would have someone reminding you the whole time you will die.
Yes. And the Greek tragedians as well, because when the Athenians would win against the Persians, and then it's part of the tragedy whereby you would remind yourself, in a way, think in terms of now, you would make a movie whereby you get people to think about the fact that, you know what, let's not get carried away with the fact that we won. Maybe they will come back and then we will lose. So it's not to be to just take things for granted or start becoming all the more arrogant about things. If nowadays, and that's, it got me thinking about things that happen on Twitter and in our daily life, not only on Twitter, but it's interesting to see this dynamics. Or when someone is overly excited about something, that maybe in your country you achieved, or you're ecstatic about a certain thing, and then there's always this annoying person who would comment something that would give you a reality check, snap back to reality kind of tweet or comment, no? And then we get angry or annoyed, as in, let me enjoy this moment. So the Stoics are about that. It's not that you wouldn't enjoy the moment, it's just that you need to constantly exercise this, keep yourself kind of to understand that you shouldn't be carried away. Like if you think you won at this or you got that, and then you relaxed, and in a sense, tenure in academia, you achieve tenure and that's it. You don't do absolutely anything anymore. There's no stressors in a way. So no, you need to keep yourself, you need to scrutinize, you need to keep exhorting yourself to think about things, to also try to. So this is why it's all about the mindset, controlling our emotions. Now, keep in mind that I could have also discussed their logic and their physics and what they thought about nature, but I'm more interested in that part where we try to try to control our desires. And I'll go back to this, the triple rule that Marcus Aurelius repeated or formulated to himself and constantly repeated, and as we said, what is enough for you? Your present value judgment, so long as it is objective. Value judgment, as I said, judging things that judging our actions ourselves, not things that we cannot control. This is what they meant by objective. The action you are accomplishing at the present moment, so long as it is done for the benefit of the human community. So what we need to do is to go back to what Tan said. It's not about me, it's about controlling my emotions, and then because we need to understand that we live in a community, so we have to ultimately do whatever is beneficial for the community. Your present inner disposition, as long as it rejoices in every event brought about by causes outside yourself. This might be taking it too far, but then the idea of, trying to dispose yourself such that you aren't really affected by what happens outside of yourself. The book I'm reading from, Philosophy as a Way of Life. So, but these are the principles that Marcus Aurelius formulates for himself, and let me tell you the exact citation. He got them from the Meditations, pages 9, 36, and 7 and 54. So he's kind of synthesizing things. And I will be ending with this. I need to just go over a few other things. We still have 6 minutes, so we're good. A rational nature is proceeding as it should if it fulfills the following conditions. So these are how to live a rational kind of life for the Stoics. If in its representations, it does not give its assent either to what is false or to what is unclear. This is one. So if something is unclear or something is false, don't assent to it. So if it's unclear, don't take stance. Don't masks. Is it? What should we do with masks? What should we do with whatever? So precautionary principle in a sense. Let's not pronounce anything or assent to anything. We need to take. We need to wait. If it guides its inclinations only towards those actions which serve the human community. So that's number 2. You need to be rational such that you work for the community. So it's not about fulfilling my dreams and about I want to become the CEO of. Yes, you can become the CEO of, but then you have to understand that you need to be caring about the community. It's not only about, I became the CEO and then that's it. if it has desire or aversion only for things that depend on us, while joyfully greeting everything allotted to it by universal nature. So we go back to this, accepting like the only thing that we should have desire for or aversion from is the things that we can control, our ethics, our values. And the things outside, well, we cannot. And as such, there are a few who did the Stoic cow? Or let's keep it at if this becomes...
I didn't, because I only got Stoic cow 1, so but I put Hindu cow in the biography. So whoever runs Stoic cow, please.
Man, this is going
remember
to be
it's a Hindu cow.
An interesting class. So the last thing, wipe out your representations, check your inclinations, extinguish your desire, keep your directing principle under your control. On what then should we exert our efforts? How should we live? Where should we, to go back to what Asad said when it comes to what should we do in a place like Lebanon, correct intentions, actions carried out in the service of the community. So he's repeating them because these are the important ones. Speech which should never be used to deceive. An inner disposition which joyfully greets each event like something necessary and familiar, since it flows from so grand a principle and so great a source. So doing the rational appearances in this case, to try to wipe out appearances, it's not in terms of therefore reality doesn't exist. It just means that we need to really, so sex appears to us in a certain way, and I'm sticking to sex because it's interesting. The quote is fascinating. It's like, ultimately you need to see things for what they are, and once you see things for what they are, you will be able to handle it or deal with it differently, instead of just sugarcoating things. And that's something, by the way, Nassim says, and I tweeted it. I think it's important to have that when it comes to ethics. I'm not sure I will be able to, or I did. Oh, no, I tweeted it. Okay, yeah. Let me see where the, there it is. Like, for example, nowadays, let me share it. Like calling things other than what they really are, right? Or when you are in a business, or modern day slavery, for example. No, we are not slaves, etc. But then you've signed a contract whereby you're working this amount for this amount, etc. Right? Calling things by their names, or you know what, this is beneficial because we do this and do that. Ultimately, tell me what it is. It's like serious, honest kind of marketing in a way, right? Without trying to sugarcoat things, or oh my God, because this is the best experience that you will ever have. It will allow you to experience and think about this and that and blah, 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 blah. You know? So ultimately, we just need to be honest. Yeah, I will. About things in life. We need to call things by their names, and without beating around the bush. Without we need think about if you ever wrote proposals for grants or things like that. And try to convince someone that this is good for whatever, blah blah blah. Yeah, so the Epicurean take to all this, I mean, I can read to you if you want quotes from Marcus Aurelius, but to be honest, it's like they're self-explanatory. His concept about God, what he thinks about gods, etc. I think it would be it's more interesting to just understand where they're coming from, to try to clarify these misconceptions that we usually have. So, and every time someone tells me that the Epicureans endure pain or just stoic cow in a way, no. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. He's the Roman emperor, and he's a Stoic who was, as I said, also influenced by Epictetus, but then he developed some of Epictetus' views. So it's interesting to see it happening in action. I have highlighted a few things, but because they all revolve around the same topic. You're going to die. If other people wronged you, it's not because they wish you ill, it's just because they don't know any better, etc., etc. Buddhism and Stoicism, like in general, ancient Eastern philosophies and ancient Greek philosophy are in a way more or less have more things in common that we might like, or some might like to admit. And let me just finish today's class with this tweet that I shared a few. Is it this one? Yes, and we'll end with this. So these Greek concepts. Ultimately, why do we need to do the things that we do? For the Greeks, apatheia, freedom from passion; arete, virtue, excellence; eudaimonia, contentment; and ataraxia, tranquility. So they focused a lot on these concepts with different emphasis, and aponia, absence of pain. Not because you can actually achieve absence of pain, it's just absence of emotional pain, because the Epicureans are going to be discussing that. Aponia and apatheia and indifference to things. So these concepts are interesting to keep in mind. The Epicureans, unlike the Stoics, will have a different approach. They don't want to participate in society. They couldn't care less. They go, as I said, rent a place at the outskirts, buy, and that's it. So we'll see what kind of things they focus on and how they achieve aponia, if at all. And so any questions? Let me stop.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of